Ago, and you mentioned you'd felt the 5.5 quake. This other quake that we're hearing now hit about 40 minutes or about an hour or so ago now. Did you feel that?
I most certainly did, yes. With the first one, Joe, I was in a building. I was out at the Riccarton race course, which has been turned into a makeshift coronial court, and we were out there listening to the inquest into victims who from the earthquake on the 22nd of February who died. So we had a room full of people who were listening to the graphic and very grim details about how their loved ones had been killed in that quake. And the coroner had just broken for lunch when the first quake struck, the magnitude 5+, and the whole building started shaking, and there was a loud crack above us, and then some plaster came down.
That must have just been so terrifying.
It was quite terrifying, and as you can well imagine, people who live here all the time, their nerves are really jangled. It's cumulative, and they have had thousands of aftershocks, thousands of them. Now, these were particularly powerful, but then after that I then headed into the city, and I was driving with my colleague at the time. We were just on the edge of the CBD when the second quake struck, and at first I wondered if we'd had a flat tyre because the entire car just went from side to side on the road.
Wow.
We couldn't control it at all, and that's not just the driving abilities of my colleague. And I have to say, people stopped, people came out of buildings, there were people in car parks. We spoke with one woman who works in Ronald McDonald House looking after, obviously, injured children, whatever. They were huddled in a car park trying to get away from any buildings. We met a woman in tears because she has a baby in the hospital and she wanted to know that her baby was safe, but the phone lines were down, so she couldn't call them. There were plumes of dust that went into the air above the CBD,
wow.
Possibly because of, further collapsing of buildings, or it may just be there is a lot of dust around in the city anyway, so maybe that was whipped up. At this stage, we are hearing some reports that there have been some injuries from that second quake, but nothing further than that at this stage.
And the reports of building problems, you mentioned that you saw a bit of dust come up from the city there, and are there any reports at this stage that buildings that may have been weakened by the major quake back in February have suffered further damage?
Well, I do know of one building out at Lynwood, which is not too far from the centre of the city, which had been condemned apparently, and we understand no one was inside it at the time. That collapsed in the first aftershock today, the first powerful aftershock. As a result of the second, we're not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if there has been further damage, and if perhaps buildings that were already shaky as a result of the first quake have come down.
And there may have been some injuries, but that's not kind of exactly clear at this stage?
No, it's unconfirmed at this stage. There have been some reports of injuries after the second quake, but I have to add that after the first quake today, there were reports of injuries which then appear to have not been confirmed, and that was a wrong report. So we shouldn't worry people too much at this stage. But, there have been some reports that there might have been injuries, but that's as far as we can say at this stage.
And so, Dom, you've been involved with covering the earthquakes there since the one happened in February. Was this kind of expected in the wave of aftershocks that were to follow this quake, or did it come, you can't predict when earthquakes are going to happen, but did this come as a bit of a surprise? Like, were they thinking the worst of it was over in terms of aftershocks?
I don't think anyone here thinks the worst of it is over. I think people just take it one day at a time, really, or really one moment at a time. All of the experts say that this follows a pattern of aftershocks, that you can still get substantial aftershocks this far out from the earthquake. And you remember, of course, we had the September the 4th earthquake. And I have to say, actually, in the week after the September the 4th earthquake, we had a lot of powerful aftershocks then as well. And then actually some of the experts will tell you that basically the February 22nd quake wasn't a new quake, it was an aftershock as a result of the September one. So really what we're seeing is an ongoing pattern of aftershocks, which of course doesn't make it any easier to bear for the poor people of Canterbury.
Yep, and they're saying this one that was centred 10 k's southeast of Christchurch, is that basically exactly the same spot that the other ones hit, the big ones hit?
It's certainly around that area.
Yeah. Okay, Dominique, and just finally, you mentioned you were at the hearing today. What significant evidence has been heard at that hearing? That's the inquest into the deaths. Yes,
well, basically today it was just trying to give the families of those who've lost people in the CTV building an official cause of death and a location of death. In terms of answering any of the big questions about why the building came down and what happened, they will be left for the Royal Commission, which is at the moment in a preparatory stage, and the public hearings are due to get underway probably the end of July, early August. But it was interesting today in that many of the families who were represented by a lawyer at the inquest, the police would state in their evidence that they believed that the person had been killed by whatever means as a result of the earthquake, and the lawyer would then ask the police to amend that to say the earthquake which caused the collapse of the CTV building. So a lot of the families, they really do want answers about why that building collapsed and whether it should have been cleared after the September the 4th earthquake for people to go back in there. So I think it's building up to be a very interesting time at the Royal Commission.
And in the middle of all that, you get these aftershocks. Okay, Dominique Schwartz in Christchurch, thank you.